So let's rejoice that we still are alive and have this opportunity to learn and practice the Dharma. This opportunity that comes very rarely in cyclic existence and doesn't last long. And so let's really determine to use it in the best way. That being to generate bodhicitta, to realize emptiness, to progress on the path to full awakening for the benefit of beings. Without hesitation, without self-doubt, without discouragement or feelings of drudgery, but really being happy at having this opportunity. You're still welcome to put questions up here if you have them. Okay, so we'll continue on with the higher training in ethical conduct, which is one of the 3 higher trainings. And the 3 higher trainings is one formulation of true paths, the 4th of the 4 truths of the Aryas. Okay, so now yesterday we talked about the benefits of ethical conduct and how important it was to our life and to our practice and to other living beings. And now we're on the section that says pratimoksha, ethical restraints. Okay, so the principal motivation to receive any of the 8 types of pratimoksha, ethical restraints, is the determination to be free from samsara. So that's quite important, that has to be the motivation. If somebody wants to ordain but doesn't have the motivation to be free of cyclic existence, then there's no real reason to ordain, because the whole purpose of keeping the precepts is to purify, accumulate merit, act as a foundation for the rest of your practice so you can attain arhatship or Buddhahood. So I've even heard it said that if you don't have at least, a fabricated determination to be free from samsara, that, it really inhibits how well the ordination takes in your mind stream. So there's 5 types of pratimoksha ethical restraints that are for monastics. Okay, so the first 2 are fully ordained monks and nuns, so bhikshus and bhikshunis. Okay, and then the 3rd is training nuns, 6 samanas. The 4th and 5th are novice monks and nuns, shramanera and shramaneri. There's a mistake here. Oh yeah, there it has. Yeah. No, it's okay. Shramanerica's okay too. Okay, so there's those 5 that are for monastics, and then there's 3 for lay followers. So the 6 and 7 are laymen and laywomen, so upasaka and upasika, and the one-day precept holders are upavasa. So when we take the 8 Mahayana precepts, that's not exactly the same as the one-day precept holders, because the one-day precept holders, that's taken with the motivation to be free of cyclic existence. The Mahayana precepts are taken with the motivation to become fully awakened Buddhists. Also, there's some small differences in, very tiny differences in what the precepts are. Okay, so for the women to progress, to full ordination, first there's the Shramaneri, then the Shikshamana, then the Bhikshuni. For the men, there's only the Shramanera and the Bhikkhu. Okay, so there's various reasons that I've heard for the intermediate ordination for women. One is to see if she's pregnant or not, which makes sense, except 2 years is a long time. Yeah, but what they say is that women are more emotional, and so this is to make sure that they have a firm, steady mind to keep the precepts. Personally speaking, I don't believe that. I think that's just one of the old stereotypes, because I've seen men be just as emotional. Yeah. So what we do here at the Abbey is we say everybody, man or woman, is, at the novice level for 2 years before going to full ordination. So we give the Shramaneri and the Shikshamana ordination the same day, and that starts the women's 2 years, and then the men take the Shramanera, and that starts their 2 years. Okay, so to have some gender equality in the way we do it. The Shikshamana ordination is really rather puzzling. It's very, the precepts by and large in the different Vinayas are extremely similar, very similar, considering that it was an oral tradition for hundreds of years. The Shikshamana, there's differences in it. The Dharmagupta and the Pali have 6 Shikshamana precepts. I think it's the Mahasangika, they have 12. The Mula Sravasti have 18. It's very strange. I think I got those numbers right. So it's very strange, because usually things are quite, quite the same. Okay? And amongst those precepts, there's a lot of difference too. Yeah. So, well, according to Vinaya, the Buddha set them forth. Right. But when you look from a historical perspective and with a critical perspective, it's rather strange, because when the Buddha gave Mahaprajnapati the ordination as the first nun, and he set forth the 8 Garu Dharmas, one of them talked about the Shikshamana ordination. But, there were no Shiksamanas then. So the 8 Garu Dharmas also are another one that when you look at from a historical perspective, something doesn't quite jive, in it. Yeah. So of course we don't know what really happened in the early days of Buddhism, do we? We just have what's been passed down, and different traditions, say different things, even about the councils, which I think rather than talk about in this course, I'll do a BBC on them afterwards, and similar with the Kadampa lineage, and how that became Gilu to do that as a BBC later on. Okay, so lay followers take the 5 lay precepts for the duration of their lives, abandoning killing, stealing, unwise and unkind sexual behavior, lying, and taking intoxicants. So intoxicants means alcohol, recreational drugs, and misuse of prescription medicine. Okay, and tobacco. Although it's interesting, in the Theravada tradition, they don't include tobacco in there. And so you will find some monks smoking. Quite strange when when you first see it. When taking the 8 one-day precepts, lay followers additionally abandon sexual activity for those 24 hours, sitting on high or luxurious seats or beds, okay, singing, dancing, and playing music, wearing perfumes, ornaments, and cosmetics, and eating at improper times between midday and the dawn of the following morning. Okay, so people often ask, why are those 8 extra ones? Like, what's wrong with it? That's how people use them. What's wrong with singing, dancing, playing music? Okay, so, well, first of all, they additionally add, celibacy for that 24-hour period. So that gives them an experience of, what monastic life is like. And then not sitting on higher luxurious seats or beds. This is because in ancient India, everybody sat on the floor. And even in our culture too, even though people sit on chairs and so forth, we put important people higher up in a better place, in a better chair, at the head of the table, this kind of thing. So the way I interpret that now, because the definition of high is more than a cubit from here to here. So, so what are you going to do? Go on a bus and sit in the middle of the aisle, or, go on an airplane and say the seat's too high, I have to sit on the floor. So in our culture, sitting a cubit high, it doesn't make you feel more important than others in general, if everybody else is sitting that way. But if you're sitting on an especially nice seat, and embellished, or at the head of the table, or in some prominent position, then it's very easy to get proud. Okay, so then the question comes, well, why do Dharma teachers sit higher up? Yeah, well, it's because they're teaching the Dharma, okay? And the Dharma is to be respected, and so you put the speaker of the Dharma up. Also, it's so that the speaker can see the people they're teaching. Yeah, because it doesn't work so well when you can't see the people and they can't see you. Okay, and then the next one is singing, dancing, playing music. So what's wrong with that? Nothing's wrong. It's not a naturally negative action, but when you sing and dance and play music, it influences your meditation. Yeah, because you're humming the songs in your meditation, you're going through the lyrics, you're writing songs in your, meditation. Generally, it refers to entertainment, okay? So, of course, they didn't have TV and movies and so on, but it referred to entertainment, singing, dancing, playing music. So, similarly, in our culture, it would be watching movies just, for entertainment's sake. If there's something with some special theme that it's good for you to listen to as a monastic, or if you have the one-day precepts, that's okay. If it's a documentary, you need to learn something about the world you live in, that's okay. But not entertainment, okay? And then wearing perfumes, ornaments, and garlands, it's decorating the body. Like singing, dancing, and music, it's to draw attention to ourselves. Yeah, and so as monastics, or as people keep the one-day precepts, then you don't want to embellish your body and draw more attention to yourself. Yeah, oh, look at my ring. Yeah, or look at my earrings, or whatever it is. Okay, so simple dress, and just keep it simple. And then not eating at improper times, to abandon that. So that means after midday and until sunrise of the next day. Sunrise being when you can see the lines on the palm of your hand. And so there's a few reasons why there's a precept against that. One is because it was very inconvenient for the lay people, for monastics, to go on their pindapat alms round more than once a day. Yeah, it was very inconvenient for them always to have to cook and go out and give food. Also, if you eat a lot in the evening, sometimes it makes your body and mind quite heavy, so your meditation is more difficult. And also, it was dangerous for the monastics because often they didn't have, regular block toilets there, and a monastic would stumble in the dark, stumble into, a pit, a cesspool, or something like that, or the people, there were no street lamps, so that people would see a monastic coming in the dark and think he was a ghost. Yeah. Okay, so of those reasons, I think the one that still is most important today is if eating makes your mind heavy and interferes with your evening meditation. Okay. Then people have different abilities and interests. When people can take the 5 lay precepts with celibacy, they can also take the 8 precepts. Yeah, that's still a lay ordination. They become an anagarika, or in Tibetan, gomni genyen. But it's a very good way to prepare for ordination because it has the most important of the precepts in there. Yeah. And so here at the Abbey, we give that to people for 1 year before they take the novice ordination, because it gives them the opportunity to try out what it's like to keep the precepts. And they shave their head, put on blue outfit, and so it gives them the opportunity to look weird for a while. I'm joking, but to get used to seeing yourself without hair and wearing the same clothes every day and like that. Okay, so people have different abilities and interests, so you can choose the type of pratimoksha ethical restraint that best suited to you. Whichever one you choose, practice the precepts with a good motivation. The wish to escape debts or to avoid caring for children or aged parents are not good reasons for taking monastic vows. Neither is the wish to have a place to live or free food. So in Taiwan, many people, after their spouse dies, then they want to go to the temple and ordain. They're Buddhists, and they want to go to the temple and ordain. Many of the monasteries prohibit that because they feel that the people are coming simply because they want a place to live and food to eat in their elder years. Okay. Bob Thurman, he's really great, because these kinds of things, for Westerners, to escape debt, it won't work. To avoid caring for kids won't work. To avoid caring for aged parents won't work. None of these things work as a reason, to avoid, to take ordination, and certainly not to have a place to live or free food, because most Western monastics are just out on their own, having to provide for themselves. Okay. So some people think that because monastic precepts restrain physical and verbal misdeeds, purity and Vinaya involves only external appearances, acting and speaking in a refined manner. However, to actually subdue our outward behavior requires subduing the mind, because all physical and verbal activities flow from a mental intention. So really keeping Vinaya isn't just outside you look perfect, but it's transforming the mind, the intentions on the inside. What I wanted to say before was about the thing of free meals. Bob Thurman, when he talks about this Sangha, he calls it the free lunch club. But he really appreciates the fact that there are monastics. You know, he's very much a supporter of monastics. He was a monastic for some years at the beginning, and he saw what it was like and the difficulties. So he appreciates that, which is very, very nice. Yeah. Okay, so for those who choose to become monastics, the practice of Vinaya helps increase contentment. Because we voluntarily put limits on what we do, we practice being satisfied with what we have and let go of our desirous impulses. So this is extremely important, okay? We voluntarily put limits on what we do and what we have. So if you're a monastic and you're complaining, I need this, I need that, I don't have this, I don't have that, then first you're forgetting that you voluntarily put the limits on yourself. And second, you're forgetting that these limits are for the purpose of creating contentment and satisfaction in our mind and teaching us to do with what we have. So if we're complaining and we always want more and better, we haven't understood the purpose of the precepts. Yeah, because the precepts are designed to put us up against the mind that says, but so-and-so got this, how come I didn't? You know, and I want this, I need that. Yeah, it's designed to put us up against this so that we can practice good enough, dear. Yeah, I have enough. I am enough. This is enough. I can make do with what I have. I don't need more and better. And to develop a real sense of inner contentment. Okay. A monastic may eat only during certain times and may not demand specific food. Whatever he receives, he must accept. We should post this on the kitchen door. Okay? May not demand specific food. Whatever he or she receives, they must accept. Yeah, the idea is that your food is, you know, you're going on alms round, whatever people give you, you are grateful and say thank you. You don't say, that one looks really good, give me more of that. And I can't eat that one I don't like, get rid of it. Okay? But again, learning contentment. What we receive, we appreciate. Mm-hmm. Buddhist monastics are not required to be vegetarian, although Chinese monastics who hold the bodhisattva ethical restraint are. And of course we are here at the Abbey. His Holiness has said whenever there's a large Buddhist gathering, people should be vegetarian. Not everybody follows that, but that was his advice. Monastics are limited to having one set of robes that we consider our own. So of course you need a change of clothes. You consider those as being shared with another monastic. They're not yours. So you shouldn't have drawers full of robes, yeah, or drawers full of lots of sweaters and lots of jackets. You shouldn't be like Imelda Marcos with, you know, so many different pairs of shoes. Yeah, again, simplicity. Monastics cannot wear expensive robes and are limited to having a small number of personal items. Okay, so even here what we have in our rooms is not considered ours. Yeah, so if the Abbey needs a piece of furniture that's in your room somewhere else, you can't say, this is mine, I don't want to give it up. You know, it belongs to the Abbey. If it needs to be somewhere else, you give it. Yeah. And so the monastics also switch rooms every year. And you don't take your bed and your personal, your furniture that by that time you're considering personal, and the word my is attached to it. You don't take that with you. Yeah, so you move into a new room, which is very good for cleaning out all your stuff in the old room, and you practice contentment in your new room. Okay. In the Zen tradition, for our friends at Shasta Abbey, for the first 6 years, they don't have their own bedrooms. They live in the meditation hall. So they have one cupboard in front of where they sit. They sit and sleep in the same place. Very few possessions. You can't say, these people snore and they wake me up, because, you're in that meditation hall with however many novices there are for 6 years, so you learn to handle it. Yeah. And you can't accumulate a lot of stuff because the little cupboard they give you won't hold it. Okay. So anything else should be considered as property of the monastic community or as property shared with other monastics. This reduces the dissatisfied mind seeking more and better. So you see how these limits reduce the dissatisfied mind? As soon as you have, your robe and your change of robes, then that's it, and your mind just says, that's it. So there's no possibility of more and better, because there's a limit on what you can have. Yeah. So we haven't put a limit on the number of sweaters, but if people are walking around in nice, expensive, embroidered sweaters, changing, every day, somebody's going to comment on it, because that's not indicative of a satisfied mind. Okay. In the Tibetan community, your shoes are your big status symbol. They all want Nike shoes. In my mind, Nike shoes look totally inappropriate with monastic wear. Yeah, there are too many colors, too many patches. They don't look like they belong. But that's the status symbol. And also your backpack. Yeah, instead of having a jola, you have a backpack. You have a nice backpack in the Tibetan community. Okay, so we should actually cultivate a lot of contentment regarding this. I don't think here shoes and our jolas are things that matter so much. Of course, if you have feet problems and you need special shoes, that is, but I don't consider that attachment. Unless you're always complaining that you want more and better of your special shoes. Okay, monastics limit relations with family in order to avoid emotional dependency and involvement in activities that take us away from Dharma practice. Okay, so we should not, as monastics, we don't hang out with our family. We don't get involved in family dramas. As much as possible, we stay out of the family dramas. And as we know, families have dramas, don't they? Yeah, this one doesn't speak to that one, and this one does this, and this one has a substance abuse problem, and this one's cheating on their spouse, and this one argued with that one, and this one failed school, and that one, we stay out of it. Okay, unless there's some way we can help by giving Dharma advice or some kind of support. But we don't become, the person who the family relies on to help straighten out the crises. We aren't on the telephone every other day talking to this family member and that family member about trying to get them so that they, aren't hating each other. Okay, because definitely that takes you away from the Dharma, doesn't it?
If you don't have a family, then maybe your home can't feel it.
Right, yeah, same thing. Using our ordination name signifies leaving behind our old identity, as well as others' as our old identity as others' relative or friend, and adopting the life of a monastic. So we even change our name. Our name has some kind of Dharma meaning, which acts as an inspiration to us. And our family, my mother said, the name we gave you wasn't good enough. It was fine, Mom, but I have a new one now. Okay. She always had a hard time saying it. Remember when she would call here, is children there? The practice of Vinaya develops mindfulness and introspective awareness. If we are about to do certain actions, we train to immediately think, I am a monastic and have chosen not to do this. Okay? So the precepts, involving entertainment, giving people big hugs, all of this kind of stuff, we maintain mindfulness of our precepts, we notice the situation, we restrain. Sometimes it's impossible to restrain from somebody already has their arms around you before you can back away. So we confess that. We don't give them a big hug back, because that just encourages the whole thing. Okay, by cultivating such mindfulness and checking if our behavior is proper when we are awake, our mindfulness becomes stronger and will also arise in our dreams. So His Holiness says that even when he's dreaming, he remembers, I'm a Buddhist monk. Yeah. So the practice of Vinaya also helps to develop fortitude or patience. Okay, the Pratimoksha Sutra says, fortitude is the first and foremost path. The Buddha declared it as the supreme way to attain nirvana. One who has left the home life yet harms or injures others is not called a renunciant. Okay, so we should remember this. Maybe we should paste this one somewhere too. Okay. So to refine their virtues, the Buddha instructed monastics to practice fortitude in 4 situations. Okay, so first, if others are angry with you, do not react with anger, but with fortitude. Fortitude does not mean that you suppress your anger. It means that you train the mind to develop, to endure difficulties or endure hardships. So it's very different than repressing. If we repress anger, it's going to come out in some other way. But it's telling us, no, we have to develop a way to release our anger. Yeah. Then second situation, if others hit you, do not retaliate. Even if it's a cat with claws that goes. Okay. If others criticize you, do not criticize them in return. Ooh, that one's difficult, isn't it? Whenever we're criticized, boy, we want to trash that person. 'Cause they deserve it. Who do they think they are criticizing me? I don't have any faults. It's all their projections. They should mind their own business. Right? Okay. Then 4, if others embarrass or insult you, do not respond by embarrassing or insulting them. That one's also difficult. Oh, someone embarrassed me? What can I do? Yeah. So these are these are real ascetic practices. Yeah? These 4 are real ascetic practices. Much more than starving yourself and doing some kind of gross Milarepa trip. Yeah, that's what Lama Yeshe used to call it. Yeah. Oh, you're doing some Milarepa trip, are you? Yeah. And then he would tell the person to eat or to get a proper bed or whatever it was. Yeah, so that's not asceticism. Restraining our anger, giving up our anger, that's a real ascetic practice. Much more difficult, isn't it? Okay. So these are real ascetic practices that will increase your fortitude, bring harmony to your relationships and to society in general, and lead to awakening. Some people think of precepts as non-negotiable rules propounded by an absolute authority. Okay? So like Buddha were some kind of manager of the universe and said, thou shalt not do this and this and this. Buddha didn't say that. Okay? So naturally, if people see precepts not as training guidelines, as useful to them, but as rules being imposed on them by an outside authority, naturally this makes them uncomfortable. But the Pratimoksha precepts are not like this. They are helpful trainings that lead to good results. For example, if we want to be healthy, we voluntarily adopt new eating habits and avoid activities that weaken our bodies. Okay, we voluntarily do that, yeah, because there's some bigger purpose. Similarly, when we want to abandon ignorance, anger, and attachment, we voluntarily curtail actions motivated by them and avoid objects that trigger them. Makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah? Thus, precepts are not forced on us by an external authority. They are trainings we voluntarily uphold because we want to fulfill our spiritual aims. Okay, so we stay away from things that are going to trigger our attachment or our jealousy or something like that, you know. And staying away from them is a temporary measure so that we can then use the time to meditate to overcome that knee-jerk reaction of attachment or anger or jealousy or whatever it is. Okay? So it's not like, oh, that object's bad, I'm going to stay away from it. You know, it's my mind is uncontrolled when I'm near that. I know that, so I'm going to stay away so I don't generate afflictions. And in my meditation practice, I'm going to develop the antidotes from the Lam Rim and the thought training so that my attachment, my emotional reaction to those things is not as strong. Okay? For the first 12 years, the Sangha did not have any precepts. But when some monks misbehaved, it was reported to the Buddha, who established a precept to abandon that action. Later, when different conditions were present, he made exceptions or gave other guidelines. Thus, precepts are not absolute rules. So all the precepts came about due to an actual situation that happened. Then in different circumstances, when the situation was different, the Buddha made modifications to the rules for those kind of situations. Some precepts concern etiquette. Since etiquette differs from one culture to another, we must adapt our behavior to whatever is suitable in a particular place. Yeah? So in Tibetan culture, if you want to blow your nose, you put your robe over your head and then you blow your nose. Okay? That's considered polite. In our culture, it's not considered polite to put something over your head and blow your nose. So in our culture, we just blow our nose like everybody else blows their nose. Okay? In terms of eating, you know, in India, people eat with their hands. Here, in the Western culture, there's some things that people agree it's okay to eat with your hands. And there are other things which, by the culture, we all eat with a fork or spoon or chopsticks, so we go along with that. Okay, we try and be gracious when we're eating, instead of looking like a what is it? Like the have you seen when they put the garbage into the truck, Boom, here I am. It doesn't look very good, okay, monastic if we're just wolfing down our food, and it's certainly not good for our digestion. Yeah? Similarly, when we walk, we try and be mindful of how we move through space. If we're slamming doors, if we're knocking into people, if we're tripping over things, it means that we're not paying attention and we're moving too fast. Okay, so we need to slow down and be aware of how we're moving through space and the effect it has on others. Okay. So pratimoksha ethical restraints are common to practitioners of all three vehicles. Those engaging in bodhisattva or tantric practice cannot ignore or belittle the pratimoksha precepts. In fact, being negligent with respect to pratimoksha precepts is explicitly forbidden in the bodhisattva and tantric ethical codes. Yeah? So even though those are considered higher level ethical restraints, unless there's a good reason, we keep our pratimoksha precepts. Yeah? We don't neglect them and say, but I have these higher precepts, so I can't be bothered with those things like not lying. That's just a piddly thing. Yeah, we shouldn't have that kind of attitude. Okay, so being negligent in that respect or criticizing them is a serious downfall. We must try to maintain all our precepts as best as we can. And for that reason, as it's stated before, we take usually the precepts in that order. So you take one of the kinds of pratimoksha precepts, whether they're the lay precepts or monastic precepts, then you take bodhisattva precepts after some time when your mind can do them. Then after some time when you're ready, then you can take tantric precepts. Okay? But we have regard for all of them. Yeah? Then, why celibacy? This is the big question in the West. Even in the Catholic Church. Yeah? It's like, why can't we have married priests? Okay, there's a reason for celibacy. I can't speak for Catholics, but, for Buddhists here. So His Holiness explains, since modern society extols sexual pleasure, some people wonder why monastics have a precept of celibacy. This has to do with our spiritual aims. On the first level of Buddhist practice, we work within human nature, which comes from having this samsaric body. Okay, so we accept this body for what it is. Here, subduing the coarse level of afflictions and avoiding the 10 non-virtues are emphasized. People are encouraged to subdue extreme sexual lust and abandon unwise or unkind sexual behavior that creates pain and confusion for themselves or others. Okay, so that's really, kind of the gross level of, just sexual lust, trying to control it. When your lust is so great that you don't care about the effects physically or mentally on your partner, you don't care about the effects on the other person's family or on your family. Okay, so subduing that kind of thing is where you start with as a lay practitioner. However, proper use of sexuality is fine for lay practitioners. Thich Nhat Hanh, a renowned Vietnamese monk, considers sexual activity without love and commitment to be unwise sexual behavior. Although this is not mentioned in the scriptures, I think it is true. Love for one's partner and a sense of responsibility are important for the stability and longevity of a relationship. okay? And especially for raising children. Yeah. One of my friends who was a monastic and disrobed, His Holiness recommended, don't have children until you have a very good, solid, firm, loving relationship with somebody so that you can raise the children in a stable situation. Yeah. Nowadays, there's so much glamour about sex and relationships. People just rush into relationships and rush out of them too, it seems like. Yeah. So better to go slowly. On the second level of practice, we no longer seek samsaric pleasures, but want to go beyond samsara. Since craving is one of the principal causes of samsara, freeing ourselves from attachment to objects of the five senses is important to attain liberation. Okay? So here, we're no longer seeking samsaric pleasures. We want to go beyond samsara. Craving, attachment is, we just went through the 16 attributes, the four truths. Craving is the example of true origins. Yeah. So we want to do something without that. So we have to free ourselves from attachment to objects of the five senses in order to attain liberation. Of all forms of attachment, sexual desire is the most intense and complex because it involves all five senses plus the mind. Thus, the Buddha advised that those seeking freedom from craving refrain from sexual desire. So do you think sexual desire is one of the strongest and most intense attachments that you have, considering you have this kind of body? And what about how it brings in emotional attachment to somebody else? Lots of emotional attachment, doesn't it? Yeah? So it's something it is very, very complex and involves all five senses. Chocolate cake, the taste sense, that's it, Sex involves everything, yeah? So it really, we want to go beyond that kind of craving to get out of samsara. So, because the motivation in our spiritual practice is different, then how we work with sexuality is different than somebody who's a lay person who maybe has a different motivation. Okay? At this point of the path, we must confront and go against tendencies that may even normally be considered human nature or part of our biological makeup, including sexual desire. Okay, so remember at the beginning he said, we start out just with accepting, that we're working within a normal human body. Here, we're looking at our body differently. Yeah, because the body is what we're grasping at from one life to the next. And sexual desire is, a strong aspect of the body. Our aim now is liberation, and attachment to sexual relations prevents this. There it is. Although sexual desire arises naturally in our body, we can control it. Thus, monastic ordination is taken with the determination to be free from samsara and includes a precept of strict celibacy. Skilled athletes with high goals eagerly abandon activities that impede their training or their ability to attain their goals. They willingly refrain from certain foods and a grand social life and spend their time in consistent training. Their restraint is not unhealthy suppression, but is necessary and conducive to realize their desired goals. Similarly, monastics willingly give up sexual relations and immersion in sensual pleasure because these hinder attaining their spiritual goals. Very good example, isn't it? Yeah. So people often say, oh, monastics are just repressing their sexual desire and so on. And His Holiness is saying, no, you have a different goal. So just like an athlete, you give up things that are opposite, that are going to take you away from that goal. Many factors are at work in choosing how or whether to use one's sexuality, and these need to be carefully considered by each individual. The Buddha did not say that everyone must give up sexual activity. It is one's own choice. This is important. Nobody forces you. However, if someone becomes a monastic, he or she must be celibate. There is no such thing as a monastic with a spouse. Yeah, very important, because this gets very confusing. His Holiness will talk about it in a few pages, of people who you can't tell whether they're monastics or not monastics, because they have a short haircut, they wear maroon, but then they seem to have a wife or a spouse, So, well, are they celibate monastics? Or can you be a monastic and also have a spouse? Or who are these people? Yeah, so it gets to be very confusing. Yeah, we'll get to that. So now the Vinaya schools. All Vinaya schools are included in the Sravakayana. There is no such thing as a Mahayana Vinaya monastic ordination, although many people who practice the Bodhisattva vehicle become monastics and practice Vinaya. Okay, so this is important. This was, this is one of the misunderstandings that was happening in the Theravada tradition, that it was happening regarding Bhikshuni ordination. Because they were saying, we have Theravada ordination. These people are Mahayana monastics. So they're different than we are, because they don't recognize the Mahayana scriptures as the Buddha's word. So they're Mahayana monastics. Actually, the monastic ordination is not a Mahayana ordination. Okay? It belongs to the level of the 18 original schools. Remember the 18 original schools we talked about? They were all Sravakayana schools. So the ordination, for example, the Dharmaguptaka or Mula Sravastivada ordinations, are on the same level as the Pali or Theravada ordination. There's no such thing as a Mahayana monastic ordination. Okay? So this was, something that I know for Ajahn Brahm, learning that made a big difference in his perspective on things. Okay? So the 3 extant Vinaya lineages stem from the original 18 schools of early Buddhism. Okay, so the 3. First, Theravada. The Theravada Vinaya is in Pali, and is practiced predominantly in South and Southeast Asia. It comes from the Vinaya lineage brought to Sri Lanka by Ashoka's daughter and son in the 3rd century BCE. Okay, then the Dharmagupta Vinaya was translated into Chinese in 410 to 412 by Buddhayasas, and in 709 the Emperor Zhongzong decreed it was to be the only Vinaya used in China. It is followed principally in China, Taiwan, Korea, and Vietnam. And this is the Vinaya lineage that we use here at the Abbey, because it enables us to have the Bhikshuni ordination. Then the Mula Sravastivada Vinaya was brought to Tibet by the Nalanda master Shantaraksita and is followed in Tibet, Mongolia, and the Himalaya regions. The literature of these Vinaya schools was passed down orally for many centuries before being written down, and the geographical distance between them is considerable. Thus, the remarkable similarity in their presentation of monastic life is striking. They all follow essentially the same precepts and perform the same Sangha transactions, or Sangha karma. Okay? So, when you look at the precepts in small details, you'll see certain, differences. But by and large, they're really incredibly the same, And His Holiness always says that, like in the Theravada, there's one precept about how to wear the robes. In the Mula Sravastivada, there's 7 precepts. But the one in the Pali covers the 7 in the Mula Sravastivada. The literature of these Vinaya schools. Oh, I already read that. Okay, so the Theravada Vinaya. Now we're going to look a little bit more what the different Vinaya systems are. So it's divided into 3 sections. So the first is the Sutta Vibhanka, contains the Patimokkha precepts. Each precept is explained in 4 parts: the background story that caused the Buddha to establish it, the precept itself, the word-by-word explanation of the precept from the Padabhajaniya, the old commentary, and then more stories to show exceptional situations pertaining to this precept and how to deal with them. Okay. The stories are really interesting, and the stories actually vary from one tradition to the next. It's interesting, the precepts are pretty much the same. The stories, there's more variety in them, although there's still a lot of consistency between them. But the stories are very interesting, and I think it's helpful to read them, because it gives you an idea of why the Buddha created a certain precept, because that's not necessarily evident from the precept itself. So it usually is, but not always. So the story is helpful, and the story also helps us see, what is the mental state that each precept is designed to counter. Yeah, because the precepts aren't just governing physical and verbal actions, they're targeting the mental states behind those. So the stories help us to see those mental states. Then the second section in the Theravada Vinaya is the Khandaka, which consists of 2 volumes. So first one is the Mahavagga, deals with topics such as ordination, fortnightly confession, and restoration of precepts, the rains retreat, the invitation for feedback, footwear, medicine, katina robe offerings, garments, formal acts of the Sangha, and schism. And then the Kulavagga, the second type of the Khandaka, describes disciplinary actions, penance, probation, and their imposition, settling issues, lodging, schism, protocols, canceling the Padimokkha, bhikshunis, and the first 2 councils. Okay, and then the third part of the Theravada Vinaya is the Parivara, which is an appendix of 19 chapters covering material from the Sutta Vibhanka and the Khandakas. It seems to be a later edition written or compiled by a Sri Lankan elder. Okay. Buddhaghosa wrote an authoritative commentary, the Samantapasadika, on the Patimokkha in the 5th century, and Dharmapala wrote one a century later. Both Buddhaghosa and Dharmapala relied heavily on the very old commentaries written at the Mahavihara Monastery in Sri Lanka. Several more Vinaya commentaries were written after these. Okay. What's interesting, whenever you have Vinaya commentaries, they don't always agree on the, interpretation of this and that. Or sometimes the Vinaya says one thing, the commentary says another thing. So this is just the way it is. The Dhammaguptaka Vinaya is also called the four-part Vinaya because it consists of 60 volumes placed in 4 sections. It is also divided into 3 categories. Yeah, so here you see the similarity between the Theravada and the Dhammaguptaka. Yeah, the categories cover the same material. Not all the names are the same. Oh no, the names are the same. Sorry. So it's just the names they're in Pali, the other the names are in Sanskrit. So the first of the Dhammaguptaka sections is the Sutra Vibhanka, consists of the Bhikshu and Bhikshuni Pratimokshas. Okay, then the Skanda, which is Sanskrit for Khandaka, explains various practices the monastic community should perform and consists of 20 vastus, or bases. Its contents are similar to the Khandakas. And then the Parivara is an appendix compiled around the 3rd century BCE. It supplements the Sutra Vibhanka and the Skandaka and discusses the compilation of the Vinaya and the first and second councils. It clarifies doubts, delineates extraordinary circumstances pertaining to the precepts, and deals with other pertinent topics. So you really see that those two, the layout of the Vinaya, very, very similar. Mula Sravastivada Vinaya is much bigger than either the Theravada or Dhammaguptaka Vinaya. It's like 4,000 pages. Yeah, it's really huge. And it contains material that's in the Jatakas, in the other canons, and material that's in the sutras. It seems like in the development of the Mula Sravastivada, a lot of other material was added in. And it's full of stories. Yeah, chock-a-block full of stories. I have a friend who did her doctoral dissertation on this Vinaya, and she loves to tell stories from it. So the Mula Sravastivada Vinaya, with 4 Vinaya Agama sections, was translated from Sanskrit into Tibetan. So the Vinaya Vastu corresponds to the Khandaka, or the Skanda, and consists of 17 bases or Vastu of ethical training. Okay, ordination, fortnightly confession and restoration of precepts, invitation for feedback, rains retreat, hides and skins, medicine, garments, katina, the dispute at Kosambi, formal acts, disciplinary measures, persons, changing locations, exclusion, house and bed, disputes, and schism. Okay. Then the Vinaya Vibhanka gives the origin stories for the Bhikshu and Bhikshuni precepts, a detailed explanation of each precept and exceptions. It corresponds to the Pali Sutta Vibhanka. Okay. The Vinaya Shudraka Vastu discusses minor points of the Bhikshu and Bhikshuni Pratimokshas, and the Vinaya Ragranta clarifies the profound and difficult points of the above 3. Okay. What I forgot to mention in the under the Dhammaguptaka Vinaya, maybe I put it later, is Master Daoshan, who I believe lived in 6th century. Do you remember? I think around then. He was an incredible Vinaya master who wrote lots of commentaries on all the Vinaya and brought things in from many different perspectives. And there's quite a number of Chinese masters who wrote on the Vinaya. If you look in our Sangha Karma book, which Tracy so kindly formatted and designed the cover of, then you can learn some of these commentaries and the names of the authors. So Tibetans follow the Vinaya commentaries from the Indian master Gunaprabha and Sakyaprabha. Gunaprabha was an Indian scholar well versed in the sutras, Vinaya, and commentaries. His commentaries, the Vinaya Sutra and Ekottara Karma Sataka, are used to study the monastic code. Yeah. So the Tibetans actually very seldom read the Mula Sravasti Vinaya. They rely mostly on Gunaprabha and Sakyaprabha and on the Tibetan commentaries to Gunaprabha and Sakyaprabha. Okay, so the number and meaning of the precepts in the three Vinayas are very similar, and the differences are minor. For example, 7 precepts concerning how to wear the lower garment in the Mula Sravastivada are subsumed into 1 precept in the Theravada. Okay, so if we look on page 69, the previous page, then you can look at the number of the precepts for bhikshu and bhikshuni in each of the traditions, and then you can look at the categories of precepts and see how many there are. Yeah. So here we just did the bhikshu precepts by category, and you can see that for the first 4 categories, the numbers are about the same. The 5th category, Theravada has 2 more. 6th category, they're the same. 7th category, the training rules that has to do with etiquette, then there's more diversion in the number. And the rules for settling dispute, again, the same. Yeah? So now the value of the monastic community. In the Sanskrit tradition, the Sangha jewel we take refuge in is any person, monastic or lay, who has direct realization of emptiness. Sangha also refers to a monastic community of at least 4 fully ordained monastics. The monastic Sangha represents the Sangha jewel, although not everyone who is a monastic has directly realized emptiness. So that's why it's a community, not an individual, that represents. Yeah? And it represents, it is not the Sangha jewel. Okay? To be a fully functioning Sangha, these monastics must do the 3 main monastic practices: fortnightly confession, or posada in Sanskrit, which is what we did last night, the rains retreat, varsa, and the invitation for feedback, pravarana. Okay, so we do all 3 of these at the Abbey, so we are now a fully functioning Sangha. Yeah, which is something to really be rejoice in, yeah, because especially in the West, there aren't so many fully functioning Sanghas like this, where you have enough people and where they do these 3 ceremonies, or 3 practices. Yeah. The Buddha also spoke of the fourfold assembly, the broader community of his followers that consists of fully ordained monks and nuns, and of laymen and laywomen who have taken refuge, and the 5 precepts. So I think we have that here too as well. We have a lot of lay followers, both men and women, who have taken refuge in the 5 precepts. Calling a group of lay followers at a Dharma center Sangha is confusing, especially if people mistakenly think that this group is the Sangha jewel that is an object of refuge. For this reason, using the word Sangha in the traditional sense to refer to the monastic community is clearer and avoids misunderstanding. Okay? And actually there is a lot of misunderstanding, not just because of the word, but the actual understanding. Some lay teachers, not only call everybody who attends the Dharma Center Sangha, but they say we take refuge in this Sangha that we're all a part of. Yeah, that's not accurate. Yeah, because all the people at a Dharma center aren't even necessarily Buddhists, and they don't necessarily keep precepts. Yeah, so I think much better to say that's the Buddhist community, yeah, and to keep the traditional use of the word Sangha to refer to the monastic community or to the Aryas. But the Aryas, we would usually say Sangha jewel. The reason the Sangha has been important, respected, and valued throughout history is that its members practice the higher training in ethical conduct through taking and observing the bhikshu and bhikshuni precepts. Okay? So this is why the Sangha is important, respected, and valued, because they observe precepts. So whenever, as a monastic, people show respect to you, they're not showing respect to you as a person. There's no reason to get arrogant. It has nothing to do with us. They are showing respect to the precepts in our mental continuum. Yeah? And these precepts came from the Buddha. Because Sangha members live a simple lifestyle and are free from family concerns and the necessity to work to provide for a family, they have more time for Dharma study and practice. Yeah, that's really true. You know, when you have a family, you don't have as much time. And that's, you know, your loyalties are very stretched when you have a family. You know, I often tell people when they ask about, you know, why Sangha doesn't have a family, I say if I had a family, this is when I'm traveling, I wouldn't be here with you now teaching. Because if I have a family, you know, my husband would want me to be there with him, and the children would want me to be there with them, and I would have to work at a job to get the money to support the children. I would have to take care of all the family crises and get involved in all of the whole family thing. How in the world would I be able to travel and teach? It would be impossible. Yeah? And similarly, you know, although many people say that practicing in a family is a challenging practice, it is very much. And I really commend the lay people who bring their Dharma practice into family life and do that, because it is very challenging. But, you know, it reduces the time and availability you have for study and practice. Yeah? And we can sometimes see that with our, you know, we occasionally invite lay teachers to the Abbey, and sometimes it happens that family concerns are very important and they're unable to accept our invitation. Okay. Thus, the Sangha has been chiefly responsible for preserving the Buddhist teachings throughout the millennia by memorizing, studying, contemplating, and meditating on them, and by teaching them to others. So this is why it's so important that monastics live in monasteries where they can do these. If you live on your own as a monastic and you have to support yourself by going to a job, you don't have time to do these. Yeah? And it really interferes with keeping the precepts as well. And that's unfortunately the situation of many Western monastics, because they don't have the financial support. But also from the side of these monastics, they like their independence. When you live in a community, you have to give that up. So, you know, it's a two-way street. Okay, lay practitioners are fully capable of doing this too, of memorizing, studying, contemplating, and meditating. However, the home of a lay family serves a different function than a monastery. Monasteries act as physical locations for the full-time practice and preservation of the teachings. When people think of monastics living together for the purpose of studying and practicing the Dharma, they feel inspired. They have a sense of optimism and hope and look forward to going to the monastery, temple, or Dharma center to practice together with the Sangha. Okay? And we've heard this so much from the lay people who come here. Just knowing you guys are here practicing, is so important to us. Just knowing that we can come here, when we have problems, when our own practice is getting weak, we can come here, we can practice together with you. You teach us, you counsel us. People really have a lot of appreciation. If you're a lay teacher, maybe you have a Dharma center, where you do that, but you don't live at the Dharma center. So when, the lay people may think, oh, I'll go to the Dharma center for those functions, but there's not always somebody there. And you can't always move into the Dharma center and live a daily schedule because there's, the Dharma center is only open certain hours. Yeah. And then the lay person's house, certainly, their spouse and kids are not going to welcome a stream of Dharma students coming in at all hours of the day and night. Okay, so it's different when you have a monastery than when you have a private house of a family. Upholding the doctrine so that it exists for future generations is important. The transmitted doctrine is upheld when people study and explain the Buddha Dhamma. The realized doctrine is upheld when people practice and actualize the meaning of those teachings in their own minds. In this connection, the Sangha is important, for they extensively practice and realize the higher training of ethical conduct, which is the foundation for cultivating concentration and wisdom.